In this video, we're going to talk about handles, and handles are a frequently created accessory in ceramics. You often need handles for cups and mugs, teapot bodies, because how are you going to pick up the teapot, vases and jugs, basically anywhere where you need a handle. And there are many ways to create handles. If you do a little bit of a Google search, you'll find lots and lots of examples of different types of handles. Now, when you're ready to create your handle, you do need to consider if we're creating something that's functional, like is the handle really meant to help hold the object, or is the handle just a little bit more decorative, or is the handle just completely sculptural? Like, yes, you could technically use the handle, but it just looks really pretty and it has a sculptural element to it. So there are several ways to create handles. I'm going to show you all of them. We can create handles using slabs, coils. We can also use pulled clay and using a tool to carve. Now in this example, this handle is made using a slab, and it's kind of proportional to the body of the mug, but it is a little wonky in shape. Example here, yes, this is also a slab, but it's much more, a little more decorative because it has that flourish on the end. The handle is made using a coil. Again, maybe not quite proportional, but it is definitely functional and it can be used to hold the object. So when we're creating our handles, we need to consider the size of the form because we want to make sure it's proportional for where the hand is going to go, as well as is it proportional to the form itself. We don't want to make a tiny handle and it's being added to a large form. And right, you have the edge of your form, so you can also think, is my handle going to be much more curved along the side of the form, or is it going to be much more rectangular or more geometric? So let me demonstrate different ways to make handles. We're first going to start with a slab. Now I did take a piece of clay, I rolled it out with a rolling pin, but I did not use the wooden slats because I don't want my handle to be too thin, so this is actually definitely more than 1/4 inch thick. To use this slab, I can actually take my ruler and a fettling knife and actually cut into a strip. Now I do need to trim the top and bottom. So from this, I can already start imagining how this will actually fit on my form, though it is a little wide, so I can always make it a little bit more narrow. And luckily, since my slab is still relatively thick, I can actually roll it out a little bit more. Now I have a form here. This is a cup or mug, and it already has a bottom, so it's all complete. But just to demonstrate how this could possibly work. So I have my handle here, and I should put it into the angle that I'm imagining, right? So this seems a little small, but I can already start to imagine how this might fit together. And again, because this slab is slightly thicker, I can actually use those two edges there to easily attach to the form to create the mug. So slabs are a great method. You can really play around with the placement. You can also play around with how you attach it onto the surface of the side of the mug. Another way to create handles, and this is my favorite way, is actually using coils, because when you look at most handles, they're already kind of cylindrical. So again, to create your coil, it's just like when you're rolling a regular coil, except we don't want to make it 1/4 inch thick because that's going to be a little too narrow. So I have this piece here and I can keep rolling it out. So from this is really long, I can actually just cut it or pull it myself. And with this, I actually have a lot more leeway on how I can attach it to the form. I can have it attached like that, right? I can attach it like this. I can even play with the placement, like I can have it come into the cup, into the interior of the mug, and then have it attach on the side. The only downside of using a coil is the ends are rather thin and narrow, so there's not a lot of surface area to attach to the surface. So you might need to add some extra clay or a reinforcement coil. So that's just the only downside of using coils. You don't want to make your handle too narrow as well when you're using coils, because it does look a little silly in terms of the proportion. But again, with a coil handle, you can really play around with the shape. And then also when you use coils, you of course can use twisted coils for a handle, or braided, or have two coils that you twist together. So several different ways to incorporate coils. The next type of handle you can create is called a pulled handle. And this one's actually very popular among artists who create pottery on the wheel. How it works is you need a big block of clay first. You need to wedge a block of clay. You will need a bucket of water. You need a lot of water. And you're going to start with your clay by hitting it into a cone. We need to form this into a cone. You can do it by rolling it on the side along the table. I like to just kind of hit it into a cone. We want a cone shape. So I pretty much have my cone shape going on. You definitely want the bottom to be flat. And actually when you do the pulling, you're going to actually pull it from downward, okay? You do need a lot of clay, because with pulling, you're literally pulling the clay, but you're not breaking the pieces. That's why you need clay that is definitely plastic, and you need a good chunk. Like this is a really huge piece. This is probably about 2 inches by possibly 4 inches, and it's a big solid piece of clay. Now I'm right-handed, so I'm going to hold onto this with my right hand, but using my left hand, and you see how I just dipped it into the water, I can actually start pulling the clay downward. This is easier if we're watching this vertically, but you are watching this horizontally, bird's eye view. But you can see, and again I have to apply more water, I can actually start pulling the clay down. Now I'm not using too much pressure. If I use too much pressure, that bottom end is going to break off. No big deal though, because I still have a lot of clay I can pull from. And this is something you may need to practice a few times. It does seem a little awkward. And yes, the top does remain a bit thicker because again, you're pulling from that edge. If you notice your hand is having a hard time sliding down the clay, you need to add a little bit more water. You can tell it does get a little messy. This is something you could actually do at the sink even. Okay, so I've been pulling it for a while. It's getting very thin there, so I'm just gonna let that break, but I can still use this. Now the next step, and yes, the top is still kind of thick, but that's okay. The next step is actually twisting it, because I don't need this piece anymore. Or you can always pull more handles from that. And now I can use this. I can, again, you can do several things with it. You could flatten it a little bit, not into a slab, but you can flatten it. But you now actually have a handle you can use. And before you use it though, because with pulling, the clay is really soft. I cannot put this onto my form right away. I really need to let it dry out. You can see I've got a lot of mess here. So as it dries, I'm actually going to curl it, but I can actually lay it like this, but on my table. And then I can actually let that dry. I'm gonna put this on a bat. The last technique I'm going to show you is using a tool to carve. I actually have 2 of these handle makers. They do look like ribbon tools or loop tools, but they're specifically meant for making handles for all sorts of things. So how this works is you do need a thick chunk of clay. I cut myself a large, big piece of clay. It is plastic, and I have 2 different sizes. I'm going to demonstrate both of them in the video. So for this one, how it works, and you need a big, substantial, thick piece of clay, because if it's too short, you're not going to end up with a handle that's long enough. But how it works is you just dig into the clay and you just drag it through. And then you now have this really nice piece of clay. You get this little indent here. Of course, I can always clean this up, but now I have this really nice piece of clay that I can use for a handle. Just like the slab and the coiled method, I can shape it how I want. It's a little short for my needs. If I needed it for this cup, that could perhaps work really well. Bigger one, the wider one, same thing, digging it into the surface. You just drag it through. Pull it out, and wow, this one you can see the size difference. This one's thicker, this one's more narrow. You can always trim it, clean it off, and you can use this to create many different types of handles. Now, when you use these handle maker tools, make sure you clean them out. Do not just leave the clay on there. You need to clean them. And once you have made your handle, you can actually place something underneath it to help keep its shape, such as like that. Or as you can see here, I've been collecting all the handles that I've been demoing, and you can actually place them on a bat and they can dry that way, so they kind of firm up before you use them. No matter the handle method that you're using, we need to allow the handle to dry a little before attaching to the form. If you attach your handle and it's still too wet, it's going to want to sag because gravity is going to take over. So we don't want to use your handle when it's super, super wet. As you can see, there are all different types of silhouettes for handles, but you now have a lot of options.